welcome to the Ea Tolkien Society monthly meeting on this May 20th?
It is.
2023. Right here in Spokane, Washington at the RPG Community Center.
Yes, thanks, Hawk. Hi, I'm Brian Huseland, the secretary of this Ea Tolkien Society meeting, Smial Quest thing. And we have some online guests. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, online guests.
That would be me and
Yeah, you have to tell which one of them to.
Okay, go ahead, Gary, why don't you begin? A little introduction,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, since Chris is from the South Part, the Southwest Farming or something like that. I'm probably close to Moria right now, as far as geographical distance. I'm Gary Haglund. I've found this society, the Smial. I guess that's how you pronounce it.
That's right.
Okay, I didn't know, but listening to you guys. So I found it, and I've been here for what, a year and a half, something like that, and enjoy the discussions we have about Tolkien. I actually learned quite a bit because up until I joined, basically I'd read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and saw Peter Jackson movies, but even the Silmarillion was, I kind of read through that. So, but anyway, I do enjoy these things, and I appreciate you folks hosting it.
Thanks, Gary.
And I live in Idaho.
Right, indeed, right up against the Misty Mountains. And how about our southern friend, Chris?
Well, Gary lives in the freest state in the nation, and we live in the most unfreest state of the nation. I would like to think.
I feel for you guys. That's why I left.
Yeah. I'm Chris Cooperstein. I have been attending these things pretty close to 10 years, maybe over 10 years by now. And I'm in the South Farthing, where they grow everything: wheat, potatoes. I just saw the new Reese's factory get its sign put on right next to the potato sheds, and doesn't seem like there's much long bottom leaf growing right now, but there's many other things.
Well, very good. Yeah.
That's just as well.
And Chris, just remind us again briefly, how did you come to read at the beginning anything by j.r.r. Tolkien?
Oh, it has nothing to do with my father reading it to me when I was 6, falling asleep in his bed, and many fond memories, and then reading it again in high school, and then again post-college, and I have read The Hobbit, at least, with my children. Lord of the Rings, not quite so much yet. They're getting to that age, but not quite.
Right. Okay, so can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Well, last month was April, and I do not have notes down from that, so I want to apologize to everyone. But would anybody like to just recap what they might remember? Because we've been working currently through influences on j.r.r. Tolkien. We started last year with kind of a tour of maybe like later writers that were influenced by Tolkien, and then we looked at his contemporaries, including the Inklings and other writers and thinkers whom he knew, or maybe he was influenced by, or that he influenced mutually. And then we've been going, of course, through various influences on j.r.r. Tolkien, starting from ancient texts, the Bible, mythologies, etc., kind of working our way through history. And so we're kind of in the early Middle Ages right now. I believe, did we start with the Elder Edda last time?
Yes, you did. It was Poetic Eddas.
Oh, the Poetic Edda, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Elder
That's the
Edda
same thing.
was also called, and it was, they think, written in the 13th century?
Right.
And the only surviving copy was in I guess, Norse Viking outpost, which is Iceland. And we talked about that for a bit, about how sometimes the places on the periphery of a culture, of a society, seem to have the information on more than information, the books and stuff like that from years ago, when the main what are known as the main modern countries don't. Anyway, it was Norse myth and German legend that we had, and then they were in something called a Codex Regina. I didn't make
Codex,
really good
the
notes.
Codex Regius, I think, yeah.
Yeah, Regius. I can't read my writing or printing, actually. And it dealt with the creation and rebirth of the world, which is something I learned from watching Thor Ragnarok, and they've got a word for it, and I think it happens about every 5,000 years or so. So we learned that Tolkien took a lot of his names, dwarf names especially, from The Hobbit, and also took Gandalf from there.
Oh, yes, from the Voluspa text. That's right.
Yeah. And Tolkien, I mean, his idea of the Norse myth, German legend, whatever you want to call it, was, there's a certain nobility, but it wasn't sacred. And he thought it was despoiled by Hitler and his Nazi movement, what he called the Aryan counterfeit, or Führer Teutonicus. So, and C.S. Lewis remarked about something along the same lines, what he called about northernness. And he thought it was worth visiting and remembering, and I said, besides history, it was more than adequate literature.
Yeah, great recap. Thank you so much, Gary. Absolutely. Chris, did you have any comments on last month? Anything that you've been thinking about, or anything to add to what Gary said?
I'm trying to remember whether I was present last month or not.
I think you were here. Maybe you showed up later, or?
Yeah, that's right. I showed up in the middle.
So the answer is both yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yeah. So, well, if anybody watches this alongside us or later on, hail and well met to all of you. And we'll just take the recap of the notes from last time that Gary shared as our kind of our notes that we've read, and we'll move on from there.
I think that
yeah, go ahead.
I brought up a couple articles regarding a couple games being released. Such.
Yeah, I don't think I have that written down. So if you wanted to mention that, or you can email that to me, and I can include it in.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Okay. Great. Well, so this month is May, and we're continuing on usually with two things. One, of course, is this journey through the influences on and by j.r.r. Tolkien, and then also looking at and reading through letters of Tolkien, because he collected his letters that he wrote to other people very systematically, and that really helps give us a window into the author. So I think what we just have to decide is how we want to kind of approach this topic of the prose Edda. It's specifically, we're looking at the Volsunga saga, and a book that j.r.r. Tolkien wrote about this, using some of the material, but kind of also blending in some original thought into his own story, which is called Sigurd and Gudrun. And Sigurd and Gudrun was published, I think, in 2009, posthumously, and along with a number of other books that were published in the last 20 years that Christopher Tolkien had kind of pulled together the material, such as The Fall of Arthur and the Three Great Tales in Middle-earth, which of course would be the tale of Beren and Luthien, the tale of the fall of Gondolin, and the tale of Turin Turambar. And we might see some overlap here between Turin, possibly, and the Volsunga saga, maybe with Sigurd. We'll see. But I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, if we could maybe put that back till maybe closer to 2 o'clock, if we can have that discussion then, because Hawk is looking for his copy of it at the RPG Research Center here. There's a lot of things in storage still. So he's looking for it right now. So I'm wondering, would you all mind if we could maybe go through any kind of new news or anything that we wanted to talk about related to Tolkien that might be in the media? And also, I thought it'd be nice we could read through the next letter in the letters of Tolkien, which I have down as letter 213, but I might be wrong. So what sounds good to you?
Sure, I've got a couple articles up.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris, and just if you could cite your source, and I'll try to include that in here
Okay.
as I write up the notes for this month.
All right. 213. Okay. The first article is from The Guardian, titled Amazon's New Lord of the Rings Cannot Use Much of Tolkien's Plot. A scholar working on the show says the author's estate has refused permission to depict any of the events showed in Peter Jackson's films. And so this is Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey seeming to confirm that he is still supervising the show's development, even though I heard some sort of rumor that he had been kicked off. And so he says that Amazon has had a relatively free hand to add details, since Tolkien did not flesh out every detail in the Second Age in his appendices or unfinished tales, a collection of stories. But Shippey called it a bit of a minefield. You have to tread very carefully, saying that the Tolkien estate will insist that the main shape of the Second Age is not altered. Sauron invades Eriador, is forced back by a Númenorian expedition, and it returns to Númenor. There he corrupts the Númenorians and seduces them to break the ban of Valar. And all this, of course, this course of history must remain the same. But you can add new characters, etc. So
Now,
I
is that The Guardian?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought that Tom Shippey had been kicked off, but I don't know.
How long ago was that article?
Oh, it might actually be a while ago.
I remember getting something within the last week or two, just a notice about what you were talking about. I don't know, Shipley, Is that a good thing or not for the series?
So Shippey is one of the probably top 10 Tolkien scholars in the world that's still alive right now.
Okay.
So it looks like they're still using him as a resource, even though I heard at least temporarily that there was a parting of the ways. So the second.
Yeah, what's the date on that Guardian article?
Let's see here. Oh, that's might be part of the issue. It says that it's 9 August 2019, which means that it must have been updated or re-fed.
Yeah. Yeah, because I knew that there were rumors that he had been let go on the project back in 2020 for Rings of Power, which was alarming to a lot of serious Tolkien fans. I do see that there is. Well, go ahead. You have another one to mention. There is an April article in the Guardian. Just looking under the search Guardian and Tolkien under news, and there is an article called "Are We Right to Be Nervous About the New Lord of the Rings Movies?" which remember is not the Ring of Power series, but something
Correct.
else. But I think that's the one you mentioned last month, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, possibly. So, second article, The Scotsman, dated April 17th. A Tolkien superfan celebrating his 22nd birthday dressed as Gandalf got the shock of his life when he bumped into none other than Sir Ian McKellen. Ben Coyles was out marking his 22nd birthday when he ran into the man who played the part of the iconic wizard in The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogies. Ben was with a group of friends celebrating his birthday in Bristol on April 13th when he turned onto Corn Street just before midnight and spotted Sir Ian. Must be a night owl. In disbelief, Ben managed to get a picture with his hero.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Good to know.
And then the third one is probably most interesting to note. Andy Serkis is to narrate the Tolkien's unabridged audiobook, The Silmarillion for HarperCollins. So there will be a narrated version out shortly.
Oh, yeah, I see that now. Looks like a new unabridged audiobook.
Yes.
You know, I have to say, nobody can doubt Serkis's vocal range. When I heard that he might be doing, he did a new recording of the Hobbit audiobook.
Yes.
And he's also done a recording of the Lord of the Rings audio.
Yes.
So I mean, he's had lots of practice.
Yeah.
And I mean,
But-
so he's an award-winning actor. But I wasn't sure at first, you know. But I'm willing to give it a shot.
But he admits the Silmarillion was always going to be a hard mountain to climb, and therefore perhaps the most rewarding. I was seriously daunted. Whereas the narrative structure and characters of both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings provide the narrator with an immense propulsion, the Silmarillion is like reading an extraordinary ancient Bible with its own creation mythology spanning many ages, written over many years. But once the flow of Tolkien's poetic imagination and limitless authority of his universe, there were passages that I found myself completely mesmerized by as I was reading, and I became it became a thrillingly wild and magical experience. I can only hope the listener feels the same way.
Well, that's encouraging.
That's kind of my experience with the Silmarillion. Was the first time I read it, I think it's 5th or 6th grade. It was a slog,
Sure.
and each time I got a little further reading it as I got older,
Yep.
started finding nuggets, and then just more and more of it.
I think high school was when I first fully like embraced it and was able to get into it.
I think it was 8th grade, like the third time I read it.
Uh-huh.
And also it had helped that I was, because of gaming, it was creating practical applications for trying to understand stuff.
Mm-hmm. You're motivated.
Well, it helped give more context as you're trying to fill the gaps. And that's when I remember 8th grade is where it really hit me. Plus I was really starting to get into music and everything too, so the
whole
whole,
idea of
that part just always resonated for me. Like my mom, an opera singer, music was
Yeah.
always.
You guys make me feel kind of inadequate here.
No,
'Cause I
you
didn't read the Similarian until mid to late 20s or something, and I thought it was a terrible slog.
but that's because it's not meant. It's really, it was put together, after Tolkien's death by his son.
Yeah.
And really, even now, now Christopher's gone, but he admitted later on that he didn't necessarily put it together in the most satisfactory way. So
Yeah.
it's more like you're looking at the ruins of a once beautiful city, and the roads have some roadblocks, and like there's debris in the street.
Unfinished bridges.
It's incomplete. It's yes.
Roads just peter out inexplicably.
And I think the difference between a city that you're like, oh, this is horrible. Why is this designed this way? No one's going to want to live here. If it was a new city that was designed that way, you would say, well, this is ridiculous. But because it's meant to, in a sense, it's representing
Ancient ruins.
the ruins of stories. This is what we have that's remained. And really, as we look into the today with the Volsunga saga, what we are surprised by is I guess maybe not surprised, is by how many of these stories we only have fragments of. Most of it's there, and then there's a big gap. Even Beowulf, there's one section that's missing. We have found it.
Tolkien was a great procrastinator too, and
Yes.
I think all his works. I think Christopher Tolkien tried to put together. Most of them were never finished. I think the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit were about it.
Yeah. I think it's one thing to write a story, but it's another one to conclude it, and bring it to satisfactory. And of course he's endlessly revising. Although some parts of the Lord of the Rings were revised less than others, and it's really interesting to see that journey of how he wrote it. I still don't have a copy of this, but Hawk does, of the annotated Lord of the Rings, and I think that's really fascinating because you understand more about he got to this chapter and then he stopped for 6 months or whatever because he wasn't sure how to write the next part. But it makes sense that you would have found the Lord of the Rings much more accessible because it is, right? I mean, I think even though I love the Silmarillion,
the characters. I mean, what you're looking for in a good story is the characters themselves being fleshed out, and we come to know the main characters, and from Aragorn to Legolas, even though he's kind of just there sometimes. Gimli the dwarf, that type of thing, and the hobbits themselves. So, and this is something I didn't really see with a Silmarillion, or now that I've got the the Fall of Numenor, which is not a bad read, but it's just basically a historic account is what it is.
If you want to enlarge.
I was trying to show the books.
Oh, the books, yes. So Hawk is gradually filling in his the library here and the research. I think, going back to what you're saying, Gary, and I'd love to hear, Chris, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but I think it is just the different purpose for which we have. I mean, there is, to me, the Lord of the Rings is like highly refined ore, and the Hobbit would be partially refined. And then you look at the Silmarillion and you think, this is still in the mine. It hasn't been taken out yet.
Yeah.
But there's these amazing opalescent and sparkling quartzite veins, and there's little traces of silver and gold, and maybe even mithril, and so you it's tantalizing. You can't, it's really hard to kind of see it as a unified whole, and I think that's kind of like the way it is. It's we might wish that, and I know I have, that some parts of the Silmarillion were complete stories, and there's a few, of course, like he said himself, the three great tales. Turin is lengthy, Baron of Luthien is lengthy, and the Fall of Gondolin has its own kind of. So those three are really, in a sense, he spent the most time on, and the rest of them are really more like scattered bits of mythology for Middle Earth and for the people who live there later on. And so if you see it that way, I think it makes it easier to enjoy, rather than trying to read it as a whole story.
Okay.
I mean, one could say the same for, let's say, the United States. So it's very good to read a great book on George Washington or John Adams or some other founding father by one of the leading writers of today. What's the author's name? I can't remember. Maybe not. Earlier it sounded like Dave maybe couldn't hear me.
I don't remember.
David
but
McCullough.
the same principles would apply. The Declaration and the Constitution are the finished product.
Yep.
But it is more interesting in some ways to read the Federalist
Papers.
and the Anti-Federalist papers.
Yep.
Very few have read the Anti-Federalist papers.
I didn't even know about it.
Because they provide counterpoints to the Federalist papers and provide and flesh out some of the arguments that led to the
That's
Federalist
right.
papers.
Who was in
people
the
over.
room where it happens?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and of course, it takes a lot more work. I agree. If you're going to read those, letters and arguments, and then try to put this together into a cohesive whole, it definitely takes more work to understand what's going on, and whereas the finished product puts it together for you. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say, is that if you look at it as kind of like the United States has its own founding mythology, to use the term more loosely, it's going to be a lot of things. I mean, you could even look at influences on the Declaration, or rather on the Constitution, of the Magna Carta in England, or the Iroquois Confederacy, and how the five peoples kind of, you had something similar to a Senate and a House of Representatives, where one could introduce an idea, the other one could then veto it or shut it down, and it's really interesting to see all those elements, but it comes together in these documents that are kind of finished.
And the representatives were chosen by the tribal women.
And when I logged into my first bulletin board using a modem in 1991 or thereabouts, what were the documents that were first out there? It was these documents of the Federalist and the
Really?
Papers and the Iroquois Confederacy and such.
Nice.
Online, available to read, because someone thought they were the most important things to have out there.
Chris, that reminds me of is that to this day, there's a website. Have you ever gone on to the OLL website? The what's that called? Liberty. Online Library of Liberty,
Yes.
oll.libertyfund.org. That's really interesting. I appreciate. It's a collection of some of the most important legal documents, charters, constitutions, and declarations in the Western tradition. And
Yes.
it includes everything from Hammurabi to Hume.
And one of those legal documents was promulgated this year, which was the rebuke by Disney Corporation against the state of Florida, because they invoked a whole bunch of old legal code.
Right. Okay, well, if nobody else has any new news, let's segue, if that's all right with you. And so, Hawk, you have here a Trivial Pursuit Lord of the Rings version. Do tell us what you
We've
have.
had this forever. I probably have to zoom the camera out.
Yes,
so I can't
please.
see anything.
And of course, Chris and Gary, you have experience. I would think back in the day playing Trivial Pursuit.
Yes.
No,
Never did.
no, but I understand what.
Never had arguments over whether the green or blue pieces. My grandpa always was like, "Well, that's blue," and everybody's like, "No, it's green." And the colors were very similar.
All right. So basically, it's just trivia, and by winning or losing. This actually is a full board game based on your trivia knowledge. Comes with miniatures of Gandalf and the others, and a Dark Rider. And apparently, we've never opened this. I've had this for years and years and years.
Sure.
It's never been opened. Yeah, go ahead. It's never been opened. I just broke the plastic. But anyway, here's how it works. Whoever's turn it is, who do the elves of Lothlorien sing about in a lament?
Ooh, okay, let's see. Can we figure it out? This is in the Lord of the Rings, right?
Yep.
And it's a fallen hero. Hint, hint.
Yes, it's an easy one.
Easy one.
Easy peasy.
Anyone? It's the elves of Lothlorien.
Who are they singing about?
Well, that's not going to be Baron.
I'll give you a hint. In the movies, it's Legolas who someone asks him, "What are the elves singing about in Lothlorien after they leave the Misty Mountains?" And he tells the other person that they're singing a lament for someone who has died.
What was the name they called him?
Mithrandir.
Mithrandir, who is
Thunder.
Gandalf.
Gandalf, exactly.
Right.
Who is struck by visions of ring wraiths in their true form whenever he hears their shrieks?
Oh boy.
Frodo.
Would that be
Frodo.
Frodo, yeah, Frodo. What weapon does the orc carry when he chases the hobbits into Fangorn Forest?
Oh, it'd be it's a dagger, a knife, isn't it?
Just a sword.
A sword?
Yeah, it was a short sword or
Short sword.
But yeah. Who in the fellowship, picks up the ring out of the snow near the pass of Caradhras? We know.
Boromir.
Boromir, that's right. Who saves Gamling by cutting off the arm of an Uruk-hai who had him by the throat?
Oh,
Excuse me.
Gamling. Gamling was one of the Rohirrim, right?
Yep.
I'm gonna just make a guess and say it was Aragorn.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Anybody?
You got me.
Theoden.
Theoden did. Wow. He defended his kinsman.
Saved Gamling by cutting off the arm of an Uruk-hai who had him by the throat.
Wow.
How many films did the movie makers first think it would take to tell the Lord of the Rings story?
3. No, 5.
Right?
2.
Two.
I can't believe they thought it would totally
I
take
know When they
2.
did The Hobbit, they thought 2. And they made
The
it-
Hobbit really should have been 2.
Yeah.
They just
So the
don't
Lord of the Rings
know what they're
movies, though,
doing.
how could you tell
It should have been 6.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
it wouldn't have been
one
rushed.
for
It
each
should have been
book.
for each book.
Chris, I did appreciate your Monty Python reference there.
Yes, I love it.
These are too easy.
Give us the hard ones.
That's I'm trying to. What's Gimli's relationship to Balin?
Gimli, it'd be his
he's,
nephew.
He's a nephew?
Cousin.
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 That's what it says.
Because he's the son of Glowing, right?
Gimli, son of
Gimli,
Gimli,
son of
Glowin's son.
Glowin.
Yep.
Oh, right, they're cousins because
Yeah.
Glowin and Owen are brothers.
Yep.
And Balin and Dwalin would be cousins, I guess. They're all related because Fili and Kili are nephews.
This is definitely biased by the movies for this next one.
Oh, boy.
What race of rulers were the ring wraiths before being corrupted by the Dark Lord Sauron?
It doesn't say
Human.
all of them.
Yeah, it does in the movie, but it doesn't use
Not
the
in the
correct
book.
name.
Oh. Well, Easterlings.
Kings of Men.
Kings of Men.
That's not a race.
That's not a race at all.
That's
one of them-
that's a bad.
Kamul is an Easterling. We know that
Yeah.
for sure.
This is somebody just watching the movie and stopping and writing down like every little thing. Who
Yes.
doesn't
I mean,
understand.
The Black Numenorians, some of them probably, but we don't know about the others really.
Yeah, this is definitely a movie version, not the books.
Okay.
This next one
Which is-
belies.
It's
It
probably
says movie
more
edition.
likely
Well, it
to get
says
people to buy it too.
movie trilogy, a collector's
Oh, yeah.
edition. So
Okay.
it is the movie version.
Wow, so this
This is
probably 2
movie
years old.
trivia.
Mhm.
Yeah. This tells you it's movie because this
Okay.
did not happen in the books.
Okay, so think movie, guys. Think movie.
What is transformed by Arwen into a wave of charging horses that sweep the ring race away? That's what gives away that it's a movie, not the book.
Yes,
The
quite.
river.
It'd be
The river.
The river. The
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the river
Oh, yeah.
is all the answer.
The myth, I thought.
That's why I say this is painful. Because it wasn't Arwen in the book.
It was Glorfindel. And there's a whole group of unemployed.
And then of course in the
Yes.
Bakshi one it was Gandalf.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna go back and watch that
The,
again.
the little white horses. I thought it was a nice touch, didn't you? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, as Gandalf did it there. Well, he said Elrond's river, and it responds to
Oh.
Elrond. But I added a few of my own little touches, if
That's
you
where
recall.
that comes
The
from.
white
I never
horses.
realized that that's where I got that
And that's
from.
the Bakshi.
In my brain.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that was somehow in the movie, but it couldn't have been because it was Arwen who chanced that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
different. Yeah. All the different permutations of the same. Yeah, totally mess with you.
Totally. Thankfully, we don't have one made by the Beatles because they almost happened.
That's true. So you get the idea. But I'm disappointed that it's the movies.
Yeah.
But for movie buffs, that's
For
fun.
movie buffs, it'd be fun.
Yeah.
You'd make
I
your
want
way
one
around the
that's
board.
accurate to the
You wouldn't get
entire history of
stuck.
Middle Earth.
Oh.
So, if you see a Trivial Pursuit
Okay.
accurate to the books,
Okay.
excellent gift ideas.
I was thinking more like, let's go for Trivial Pursuit on Norse mythology.
Oh, well, this is the Tolkien Society.
I know, right.
Because I would like to do
Yes.
like a little, like 5 minutes of trivia every
Yes.
session.
Yeah.
We do that with our gaming sessions.
Well,
we
have
do a little bit of humor
you
and
have
stuff.
I think you have a book, don't you? You have a Lord of the Rings trivia book. I know my
Maybe.
brother-in-law does.
Maybe. I don't know, actually. I'm not sure that I do, actually.
So next month we should
Yeah.
totally do trivia I think I like this idea. I think we should include trivia every
Yeah.
month.
And because it can trigger nice conversations and stuff.
Okay.
Alright.
So we basically did an unboxing here.
Yeah, basically.
And there was much rejoicing.
Yay.
But Robin is minstrel's right.
Yay.
Okay. And so
And they bravely ran away.
now let's do this. Let's segue to the letter, and then we'll save the second half for the Sigurd and Gudrun. So if everybody wants to find their copy of Tolkien's letters, that would be wonderful. And I thought we were on number 213, but double check that and see. I might be wrong.
Yeah, we did the 2 and 2 draft of a continuation.
That's where I've got it bookmarked.
So yes,
2 and 3.
Is that where we are?
it appears so.
Good. Very good. Okay.
Oh, we may have done this one, but I think it's important enough to do again.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, would you like to start us off reading maybe a paragraph, and then we can stop and chat, and then and then maybe Gary could read another paragraph, and then we'll go around. And it looks like there's some long ones, so if you feel like stopping in the middle, that's fine, or you can keep on reading if it's not too much for you.
213 from a letter to Deborah Webster, 25 October 1958. I do not like giving facts about myself other than dry ones, which anyway are quite as relevant to my books as any other more juicy details, not for simply personal reasons, but also because I object to the contemporary trend in criticism with its excessive interest in the details of the lives of authors and artists. They only distract attention from an author's works, if the works are in fact worthy of attention, and end, as one now often sees, in becoming the main interest. But only one's guardian angel, or indeed God himself, could unravel the real relationship between personal facts and an author's works. Not the author himself, though he knows more than any investigator, and certainly not so-called psychologists. A detest for psychology.
Yeah, I think I do remember reading this letter, but I think it's good to read it again. And so something else might come from it. Gary, do you want to read this one, or shall I read the next paragraph?
It's a long one. If you can stand to listen to me for that length of time.
Oh, sure.
Okay. But of course, there is a scale of significance in facts of this sort. There are insignificant facts, those particularly dear to analysts and writers about writers, such as drunken and such like disorders. I do not happen to be guilty of these particular sins, but if I were, I should not support that artistic work proceeding from the weaknesses that produce them, but from other and still uncorrupted regions of my being. Modern researchers inform me that Beethoven cheated his publishers and abominably ill-treated his nephew, but I do not believe that has anything to do with his music. Then there are more significant facts which have some relation to an author's works, though knowledge of them does not really explain the works, even if examined at length. For instance, I dislike French and prefer Spanish to Italian, but the relation of these facts to my taste in languages, which is obviously a large ingredient in The Lord of the Rings, will take a long time to unravel and leave you liking or disliking the names and bits of language in my books just as before. And there are a few basic facts which, however dryly expressed, are really significant. For instance, I was born in 1892 and lived for my early years in the Shire in a pre-mechanical age. Or more important, I'm a Christian, which can be deduced from my stories, and in fact a Roman Catholic. The latter fact perhaps cannot be deduced, though one critic, by letter, asserted that the invocations of Elbereth and the character Galadriel, as directly described or through words of Gimli and Sam, were clearly related to Catholic devotion to Mary. Another saw in Weybred, Lambus, Viaticum, and the reference to its feeding the will. And I would assume that's part of the body of Christ. You get the
right
wafer. Okay.
Right.
And being more potent than fasting, a derivative from the Eucharist. Okay. That is, far greater things may color the mind in dealing with the lesser things of a fairy story.
Okay, so he basically breaks down 3 different kinds of facts. He says the first kind of facts really have nothing to do with the work that an author or artist creates. So Beethoven, etc. The second category is significant facts which have some relation to an author's works, but it doesn't really explain the works. And then there are a few basic facts which are really significant. And so even though some people might say, "Oh, well, I can see this or that in your stories," whether they're correct or not, they're onto something that maybe influences a particular writer, which, even as we're talking as well about mythology, clearly Tolkien and Lewis and others were influenced by northern or Western European mythology rather than Southern. You don't have the Greek gods appearing in their stories. Although Lewis did like to combine things and mash it up a little bit, right?
Well, I mean, this is something that we see. I mean, we've talked about this before. But Tolkien, grew up in a time in agrarian society. Long before. Not long before, but before a lot of the trappings of modern life were happening. I mean, when he grew up, everything was pulled by buggy and horses and stuff like that, and he still is kind of what's the term? A longing for what has happened, before, prior to that, what he thought was an ideal life.
Right. Hey, Gary, I'm only seeing part of you. Is that my fault?
No, it's actually my fault.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure
I'm sitting off to the side.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Okay.
So I'll sit here now.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and read the next paragraph unless, did anybody have another comment about the last paragraph?
I think this came up the last time we read it, but he dislikes French, and yet his son married a French woman and went to go live in France. So
how
what
ironic.
Does that tell you?
Yeah, a lot of the British upper class did. If you got money, you seem to go and live someplace in France.
That's right. Okay. So facts about the author is what he was talking about. Let's see what the next paragraph's about here. I am in fact a hobbit in all but size. I like gardens, trees, and unmechanized farmlands. I smoke a pipe, and I like good plain food, unrefrigerated, but detest French cooking. I like and even dare to wear on these dull days ornamental waistcoats. I am fond of mushrooms out of a field, have a very simple sense of humor, which even my appreciative critics find tiresome. I go to bed late and get up late when possible. I do not travel much. I love Wales, what is left of it, when mines and the even more ghastly seaside resorts have done their worst, and especially the Welsh language. But I have not in fact been in Wales for a long time, except for crossing it on the way to Ireland. I go frequently to Ireland, Ira, Southern Ireland, being fond of it and most of its people, but the Irish language I find wholly unattractive. I hope that is enough to go on with. So he's trying to give facts about himself so that she will be able to know more about him. I'm not sure. Who is Deborah Webster? Let's see here.
Is she a reporter or what?
Well, I wonder the same thing. I don't see any note on here. Any idea on that, Chris?
No.
Okay. Okay,
I'm
so
looking.
So
I'm looking to see where Ira is.
Ira is Ireland. It's just the Republic of Ireland because he had
Oh, Southern Ireland.
to
Okay.
distinguish it. Yeah, or the Republic of Ireland.
Right.
He had to distinguish that from Northern Ireland, which of course is still part of the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Whereas, as he's described C.S. Lewis, C.S. Lewis was an Ulsterman, a Northern Irish Protestant. And so, very different. Whereas Southern Ireland would be much more Catholic, or at least at that time it was. Okay, so on to letter 214.
This is a real long one.
Oh, okay.
It goes from 280. Well, I have it in my book from page 289 to 296.
Oh my. So maybe we should save it till next time, huh?
Yeah. Maybe the whole session next time
Yeah.
we'll do this letter. I don't know.
Well, yeah, probably do need to give it some more. I suppose it depends on how much time we want to give to Sigurd and Gudrun. Did either of you have a chance to have a look at the book?
I didn't order it. No.
Yeah.
I perused the archive.org version.
Yeah, I actually did not read it either. I didn't have a copy of it, and I considered ordering it, but I knew it wouldn't come in time. And this copy was kind of in a box. I didn't know where Hawks was. So what I did is I went through and looked at the source material for the Volsunga Saga. And then there's a really great podcast by Signum University on Tolkien's treatment of it. So I guess here's the question. If we save this letter for next time, then that means we have enough material to fill the next 40 minutes. Do we really have that much? Or maybe it might work to read letter 214 for the next 20 minutes and then save the last 20 minutes or whatever to talking about this book.
Yeah, I made some notes from what was written about Sigurd and Gudrun.
Okay.
Whatever. And there's not very much there. Basically it's...
Well, before we get started, Chris, do you have an opinion on whether we go right into this now? Do you think it's going to take more time, or do you think we should try to kind of just hit this next letter and then do a shorter kind of review of this?
I don't know how much I'm gonna contribute to that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was sensing.
Yeah.
Gary, do you feel like when we talk about this, do you think that you have enough that we would go over a half hour?
No.
Okay. Then I'm going to make an executive decision that let's go ahead and try to put in a good 20 minutes on letter 214. I think we might be able to read it in that time. And then we'll save the last part for the legend of Sigurd and Gudrun. So Chris, would you be willing to read the preface and maybe the first part of the letter?
Yes. Let's see, 214. To A.C. Nunn, draft, as not sent. A reply to a reader who pointed out an apparent contradiction in The Lord of the Rings in the chapter A Long Expected Party. It is stated that hobbits give presents to other people on their own birthdays, yet Gollum refers to the ring as his birthday present. The account of how he acquired it in the chapter of Shadow of the Past indicates that his people received presents on their birthdays. Mr. Dunn's letter continued, therefore one of the following must be true. 1. Smeagol's people were not of hobbit kind, as suggested by Gandalf. 2. The hobbit custom of giving presents was only a recent growth. 3. Customs of the Stoors, Smeagol, Gollum's people differed from those of other hobbits. Or 5. There is an error in the text. I shall be most grateful if you can spare time to undertake some research into this important matter. Not dated, probably late 1958, early 1959. Dear Mr. Nunn, I am not a model of scholarship, but in the matter of the Third Age, I regard myself as a recorder only. The facts that may appear in my record are, I believe, in no cause due to errors, that is, statements of what is not true, but omissions and incompleteness of information, mostly due to the necessity of compression, and to the attempt to introduce information en passant in the course of the narrative, which naturally tended to cut off many things not immediately bearing on the tale. In the matter of birthday customs and the apparent discrepancies that you note, we can therefore I think, dismiss your alternatives 1 and 5. You omit 4.
Yeah, it is true in the note there. He says 1, 2, 3, and 5. He doesn't say number 4. And also, just to include the that footnote there, the reason why he says to Mr. Nunn, "I'm not a model of scholarship," is because Mr. Nunn said to him, he said that he called Tolkien a model of scholarship. So that's why. Hey, John. Oh, Bob. Hello.
No, not Bob. I don't float. Rob.
Rob. Anyway. All right, so any comments on that first part there?
Smial Gollum preceded the hobbits by about 500 years, right? And they were located on the east side of the Misty Mountains.
I think Smeagol is well over 1,000 years old, actually.
Really?
Let me
For some
double check.
reason I had in my head that was 500 years.
You might be right. Let me check that. Oh, yeah, he was about 589 years old when he died. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, and they were, I don't know, a completely different tribe, and they somewhat civilized anyway, but I mean, murder was still not accepted among the people there, the stores or whatever. So, you know, they could have had different customs.
Yeah.
And that's why I would have gone with.
Well, why don't you go ahead and read the next part there, Gary, and we'll.
I would have gone with number 3.
You'd go 3?
Yeah. But anyway, with regard to number 1, Gandalf certainly says at first, I guess, page 62, but that is in accordance with his character and wisdom. In more modern language, he would have said, I deduce, referring to matters that had not come under his direct observation, but on which he had formed a conclusion based on study. You will observe in the Appendix B that the wizards did not come until shortly before the first appearance of hobbits in any records. But he did not, in fact, doubt his conclusion. It is true all the same, which is, etc., which is on page 63 of his book, whatever. Your alternative, number 2, would be possible, but since the recorder says on page 35 of the Hobbits, which he uses whatever its origin as a name for the whole race. He uses whatever its origin as a name for the whole race, and not the hobbits of the Shire or Shire folk. It must be supposed that he means that the custom of giving presents was in some form common to all varieties, including stores. But since your number 3 is naturally true, we might expect even so deep-rooted a custom to be exhibited in rather different ways in different branches. With the immigration of the stores back to Wilderland in Third Age 1356, all contact between this retrograde group and the ancestors of the Shire folk was broken. More than 1,100 years elapsed before the Deagle-Smeagol incident. That was circa 2463. At the time of the party in Third Age 3001, when the customs of the Shire folk cursorily alluded to insofar as they affect the story, the gap of time was nearly 1,650 years.
Okay.
So I was right. It is number 3.
Yeah, and that's that makes sense just because of customs change over time, right?
Yeah. You want me to go on?
No, I'll take a turn.
Okay.
All hobbits were slow to change, but the re-migrant Stoors were going back to a wilder and more primitive life of small and dwindling communities, while the Shire folk in the 1400 years of their occupation had developed a more settled and elaborate social life, in which the importance of kinship to their sentiment and customs was assisted by detailed traditions, written and oral. Though I omitted any discourse on this curious but characteristic fact of their behavior, the facts concerning the Shire could be set out in some detail. The Riverside Stoors must naturally remain much more conjectural. Chris, you're next.
Birthdays had a considerable social importance. A person celebrating his or her birthday was called a Ribiaden, which is to be rendered in accordance to the system described and adopted by Birding. The customs connected with birthdays had, though deeply rooted, become regulated by fairly strict etiquette, and in so consequence were in many cases reduced to formalities, as indeed suggested by not very expensive ones as a rule, page 35, and especially by page 46 to 20 through 26. With regard to presents on his birthday, the Birding both gave and received presents, but the processes were different in origin, function, and etiquette. The reception was omitted by the narrator, since it does not concern the party, but it was in fact the older custom, and therefore the one most formalized. It does concern the Smial-Deagle incident, but the narrator being obliged to reduce this to the most significant elements and to put into the mouth of Gandalf talking to a hobbit, naturally made no comment on the custom, which is the hobbit, and we should regard its as natural in connections with birthdays. Receiving of gifts. This was an ancient ritual connected with kinship. It was an origin or recognition of the Birding's membership of a family or clan, and a commemoration of his formal incorporation. No present was given by father or mother to the children or their children's birthdays, except in rare cases of adoption. But the reputed head of the family was supposed to give something, if only in token. So down here, let's see, the corporation. Anciently, this apparently took place shortly after birth by the announcement of the name of the child to the family assembled, or in larger or more elaborate communities to the titular head or clan of the family. See note at end. Okay, on to giving gifts. It was a personal matter, not limited to kinship. It was a form of thanksgiving and taken as recognition of services, benefits, and friendship shown, especially in the past year. So I see that in the business world a lot, and its prohibition towards gifts given to public servants.
Ah, yes.
But out in the private sector, business to business, yes, there are large gifts given back and forth.
Okay, so yeah, one thought I had is that the giving of gifts on one's birthday is, in a way, kind of similar to the Indian tradition of potlatch. You guys familiar with that?
I know a few things about potlatch because
Yeah,
of
it's not a
Pacific
birthday.
North-
Yeah, go ahead.
because of Pacific Northwest traditions and a couple of the tribes up there. The British, when they controlled, as a colony was now British Columbia. The governor there, British governor, outlawed them for one reason. It was about the same thing as, I can't remember the guy's name, but they outlawed the burning of widows in India. But one of the customs that the tribes had, I think at least the Haida and the Tlingit, was during a potlatch, the chief of the tribe could release someone as a slave, or he could, kill him, have him killed. So the British thought this was barbaric, and they put a stop to it for potlatches for quite some time.
Well, that's interesting.
It probably hasn't gotten out a lot about Native American history because they try to gloss over some of the stuff. But anyway, what's interesting is the Haida were called the Vikings of the Pacific Northwest. And they range all the way down to, they think Baja California, in their 60-foot dugout canoes, raiding and taking slaves. So yeah, they were a fearsome bunch.
Sure. Well, it's a big party. It's a gift-giving feast. And the United States, kind of adding to what you said, Gary, already about British Columbia, the United States, the federal government banned the potlatch from 1884 to 1951 in an amendment to the Indian Act. The government and its supporters saw the ceremonies anti-Christian, reckless, and wasteful of personal property. But of course, by the 1880s, they weren't having slaves in the United States anyway. I don't know. Further north, it may have been a different situation. With the Haida and all that. But I think that I've always seen the potlatch as quite an interesting thing because we live in a pretty materialist age where, everybody loves to receive, and that's nice, of course, to give gifts to people. But it's pretty awesome if a person, demonstrates their generosity by actually giving away what they own. And to make yourself poor, in a sense, was kind of a way of showing greatness, which I think is very interesting. Of course, I'm sure that a chief if a chief did this, they would be able to get back somehow, one way or the other, a lot of what they, had given away, or maybe others would give gifts to them. I don't know. But you truly were seen as the person who could give away the most was seen as the most generous and noble person. So I think that part of it's kind of fascinating to me. Chris? Any thoughts? I don't think I can hear you actually.
Did I break something?
Possibly. Can you hear me, Chris and Gary?
Oh, I must have broke something. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so they can hear me, but I can't hear them now.
Sorry.
It's okay.
How about now?
Okay, so Chris, hold 1 second, please.
Well, they need to actually be talking so that we can.
Okay, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead and talk a minute, and we'll try to get you.
Huh. Well, that thinks it's there. That's weird. It thinks it's. I mean, does it place its sound?
Okay, let's take a break.
Yeah.
In the meanwhile, stand up and stretch your legs, gentlemen.
I'm gonna log out.
We'll come back. We'll come back in about 4 minutes. Okay, 4 or 5 minutes.
I don't know if I broke it or it just glitched on its own. That's what the ASI was like triggered. My Windows is back there. That's the source. Hello.
Greetings.
There we go. So it just glitched. Windows just.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Yep.
Okay, and I can hear you. I'm gonna rest my leg. I'll be back.
Okay.
Show us on a break. We're gonna change scenes.
chief of the tribe. Yeah, can you hear me?
Fact check.
Welcome back to the Ea Tolkien Society, where we're currently discussing this month in May the letters of Tolkien, as well as looking at his story, his adaptation of Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun. Let's go back to letter 214, and
So-
we were talking about the receiving of gifts and the giving of gifts, and what the cultural significance was for the hobbits in this shire. Let's go on to the next
Yes.
paragraph where it says, in the Shire etiquette. But first, Chris, you've been saying something about potlatch and the Indian culture.
So the Wallowa Nez Perce tribe has a area where they have a 3-day feast, friendship feast, and they give, part of it is giving gifts that have been handmade between tribal members and historical relatives of settlers and perfect strangers, and it's a wonderful show of friendship and affection that occurs on the third weekend of July, and but it has turned into something of a bit of a bigger gift giving thing that's happening, where the United Methodist Church holds, and the last members in that organization, what do? They give their land and the structures on the land back to the tribe. And a farmer who has long held land of the east moraine of Lake Wallowa, what do? They put it in a land trust, for the Nez Perce tribe.
Wow.
And so you're seeing the giving, quite literally, of land that's long held by the natives back to them, as the need of it by settlers who no longer need to subsistence farm, don't need the land anymore. And so I think something very interesting and fascinating is going on in that community.
Yeah.
Which just speaks to me that there is a long history of friendship that is continuing to this day.
Yeah, that's amazing, because where I came from in Western Washington, the relations between the tribes and the other folks was not like that at all, and a lot of it had to do with one individual who took over chairman of the largest Native American Indian organization in the country, a guy by the name of Brian Cladusby. But yeah, it's good to hear that the relations are good and people are getting along and things like that. But my experience has been quite a bit different.
The Nez Perce and the settlers have always had good relations.
Okay.
And it was only when the federal government stepped in that those relations soured, but they didn't sour against the white man. They were wise. They were wise enough to say, no, this is the federal government doing this, and not the local people.
Yeah. Well, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is the most, what do you call it, malfunctioning agency, the longest malfunctioning agency in the federal government. So, maybe here or there. When we go back, I do want to make one comment, if I could, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the subject of the stores, there was a kind of a footnote at the bottom of page 290,
Yeah.
and it said between 2463 and the beginning of Gandalf's special inquiries concerning the ring, nearly 500 years later, they appear indeed to have died out altogether. So the stores have died out, and then he also says, except of course for Smeagol, or either died out altogether or to have fled from the shadow of Dol Guldur. So that's the location. They would have been in the southern part of the Misty Mountain, or not the Misty Mountains, but
Valley.
yeah, Mirkwood, which was once called the Greenwood.
Right.
Yeah.
River and the Mirkwood and the mountains, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Just to think. Wow. So by the time of the all of Gollum or Smeagol's relatives would all be gone by then. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. And I was just looking also at the footnotes, noticing that the word birding comes from the Anglo-Saxon word bird, B-Y-R-D, which meant birth. And so the D in the Anglo-Saxon was more like a th sound, so more like birthing. All right, so now we are to in the Shire etiquettes, I think. In the Shire etiquette, at the date of the party, expectation of receiving was limited to second cousins or nearer kin, and to residents within 12 miles. Even close friends, if unrelated, were not expected to give, though they might. The Shire residence limit was obviously a fairly recent result of the gradual breakup of kinship communities and families and dispersal of relatives under long settled conditions. For the received birthday presents, no doubt as a relic of the customs of small ancient families, must be delivered in person, properly on the eve of the day, and at latest before luncheon on the day. They were received privately by the birthing, and it was very improper to exhibit them separately or as a collection, precisely to avoid such embarrassments as may occur in our wedding exhibitions, which would have horrified the Shire folk. The giver could thus accommodate his gift to his purse and his affections without incurring public comment or offending if anyone other than the recipient. The custom did not demand costly presents, and a hobbit was more readily flattered and delighted by an unexpectedly good or desirable present than offended by a customary token of family goodwill. Okay, so that's fun to think about that. Any comments on that section of the letter?
I think, again, in the footnote down here, hence the Hobbit expression, a 12-mile cousin. And recognize no obligations beyond its precise interpretation. So if you live further than 12 miles, you were kind of out of luck, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Tolkien's referring to the wedding presents, right? Like you have a table.
Yeah.
We do this to this day, right? So you have a table, and all the
Yeah.
wedding presents are placed on a table, and everyone sees them. Although they're all in bags and they're all wrapped, so they wouldn't necessarily know what they were. But in this time, of course, they wouldn't be wrapped, so you end up just kind of placing them there, and then everybody knows what you gave, and that would be kind of socially embarrassing. So they would not do that. They were received privately by the birthing. So I think this is kind of interesting. My wife, her side of the family always celebrated birthdays on the morning of. So you wake up in the morning, and at breakfast time you open your presents. Whereas in my family, it was always later in the day.
Yes, the concept of Christmas Eve presents versus Christmas morning presents. And we have long since fought over that one in our family. And
Yes.
we reached a compromise in that we had books to be opened before Christmas Eve service. And that allows one to read long into the night in anticipation of Christmas morning.
Where is that custom from? Because we opened ours Christmas Eve. The
Yeah,
presents.
my wife's side opened theirs on Christmas Eve, and we always did it on Christmas Day.
And the thing about Christmas Day was, my parents tried it once, and my brother and I got up and made such a hullabaloo that they went back to Christmas Eve.
Ah,
They were not ready to get up.
Oh.
I see.
Okay, it looks like opening your gifts on Christmas Eve is a common German tradition. My wife's side of the family is German and Dutch, and so that is very interesting to note that they open their gifts on Christmas Eve, and whereas mine did not, and we didn't have any German connection at all. So that might be it.
Right. And I'm German, and it was Christmas morning, and my wife is Lutheran, and it was Christmas Eve.
So maybe it was more of a Lutheran thing.
It may have been, yes.
Yeah, we were Lutherans.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there's more to it than that, I guess, but we'll have to move on. All right. So let's see where I was. Oh yeah. So Chris, you're next. A trace of this can be seen.
A trace of this can be seen in the account of Smial and Beowulf, modified by the individual characters of those rather miserable specimens. Beowulf, evidently a relative, as no doubt all the members of a small community were, had already given his customary present to Smial, although they probably set out on their expedition early in the morning. Being a mean little soul, he grudged it. Smial, being meaner and greedier, tried to use his birthday as an excuse for an act of tyranny. "Because I wants it," was his frank statement and of his chief claim. But he also implied that Dee's gift was poor and insufficient token, hence Dee's retort, to the contrary, it was more than he could afford. The giving of presents by the bird.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest that Gary reads one more paragraph, and then we're going to probably need to stop here just because it is so long. I doubt that even if we didn't do anything else, we might not finish it by the end. So maybe, Gary, do you want to read just maybe a little bit more and find a good stopping spot?
Okay. One thing I thought about when Chris read that was Tolkien didn't portray Deagle or Smeagol as very upstanding characters at all.
No.
So, and I don't know if that was included with if all the stores were like that or what, but it's interesting. Anyway, the giving of presents by the birding, leaving out the account, the gifts to parents. And you want me to read the footnote down here?
Yeah, let's read that.
Excuse me. In more primitive communities, as those still living in clan smiles, the birding also made a gift to the head of the family. There is no mention of Smeagol's presence. I imagine that he was an orphan, and do not suppose that he gave any present on his birthday, save, grudgingly, the tribute to his grandmother. Fish, probably. One of the reasons maybe for the expedition would have been just like Smeagol to give fish actually caught by Deagle.
Was that a regifting?
Yeah, I guess neither of them were very nice. Okay, the giving a present, present by birding, leaving out the account, the gifts to parents mentioned above, being personal and a form of thanks, very, very much more in form in different times and places. And according to the age and status of the birthing. The master and mistress of a house or hole in the Shire would give gifts to all under their roof or in their service, and usually also to near neighbors. And they might extend the list as they pleased, remembering any special favors in the past year. It was understood that the giving of presents was not fixed by rule, though the withholding of a usual gift, as a good example is to a child, a servant, or a next door neighbor, was taken as a rebuke and mark of severe displeasure. Juniors and inmates, those having no house of their own, I guess it's an inmate, were under no obligations as rested on the householders, but they usually gave presents according to their means or affections. Not very expensive as a rule, applied to all the gifts. Beowulf was in this, as in other ways, an exceptional person, and his party was a riot of generosities, even for a wealthy hobbit. But one of the commonest birthday ceremonies was the giving of a party in the evening of the day. All those invited were given presents by the host and expected them as part of the entertainment, if secondary to the fare provided. But they did not bring presents with them. Shire folk would have thought that very improper if the guest had not already given a gift, being one of those required to do so by kinship. It was too late. For other guests, it was a thing not done. It looked like paying for the party or matching the party gift. It was most embarrassing. Sometimes, in the case of a very dear friend, unable to come to a party because of the distance or other causes, a token invitation would be sent with a present. In that case, the present was always something to eat or drink, purporting to be a sample of the party fare. That's interesting. You want me to go on?
I think we need to stop there, actually.
Okay.
And,
one comment I meant, from my time in Japan, their custom of owning yuri, the required, so you don't lose face of providing presents and everything else, that the poorest among them really had a tough time with that. We had a lady who had fallen on tough times, and she did housework for us once a week. Well, this is before I married my wife, but I had somebody else at the time, which we eventually parted ways. But she, when there was some kind of event or celebration, she had a lot of difficulty purchasing a worthy gift. And I thought that was weird about the different customs they have over there, but that was one of the, I think, most onerous on folks who are not doing well.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Let's move on to the Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun, and we can continue discussion next month as well, if there's more that we want to talk about. So you've got some notes about this, Gary, so I want to come back to you here in a few minutes. So essentially, we start with understanding what is the source material, and I'm wondering if Chris Cooperstein, if you'd be willing to, maybe if you wanted to look on Tolkien Gateway or on Wikipedia, just to give us a kind of a short definition of what the Volsunga Saga is. But while is that okay if you do that? Would you be willing to look that up?
I'm looking in that
Okay,
book.
so while I'm doing that, I just wanted to mention that, as has been mentioned earlier, the book that Tolkien wrote is based on these sources, and he mentions 2 poems in here that he's written himself, which were inspired by that. One's called The Lay of the Volsungs, and the other one is called The Lay of Gudrun. And so, Chris, let me know when you're ready. But I just, my comment, just to kind of, all I really wanted to say was, I was surprised to learn that there were a lot of different versions of the story. Some were German, some were Scandinavian, and they kind of seemed to influence each other. So, Chris or Gary, do you want to comment further maybe on, just so we can kind of go over what is the source material that he's drawing from here?
Kirk, you want to go ahead?
Let me see if this is the right thing. No, that doesn't look like the right thing. Go ahead, Gary.
My understanding, and it's extremely incomplete, but there was a lot of cross-cultural movement between, with the northern Germanic tribes, the Norsemen. I don't know when they broke off or anything like that, but I mean, the Scandinavian folks, I mean, basically, I think were Germanic in origin, but I could be wrong on that. I mean, it's, they're fairly, what we know about them is they're fairly recent, the Vikings were, 1,000 years ago? And if you look, I mean, this was the folks in France also, France and Germany, Denmark certainly, and I guess it wouldn't be too hard to speculate that they adopted very similar customs, myths, legends, whatever, stories that they told their children. So that's my reading anyway.
So this is the so sounds like the source material would include the Younger Edda, also known as the Prose Edda, which was kind of curated and put together by Snorri Sturluson in Iceland. And then you also have the Volsunga Saga, which is seems like there's Scandinavian sources there, or it's part of the Prose Edda, but it's a section of it. And then you have the continental or German sources, which have like the Nibelung story, right? That seems to come into this. And so we have Sigurd in the northern or Scandinavian stories, and the German version of that is Siegfried, right?
Yes.
The first time I heard the name Siegfried would have been watching All Creatures Great and Small. Siegfried Farnan, the veterinarian.
Yeah, and of course I got introduced to this in the Germanic side with my German teacher in high school, and then my father had the audacity to take us to the Seattle Opera with several friends for the entire Ring series.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a formative month of my life.
How old were you?
High school.
Wow.
And it's there's 4 acts, and each one has to be separated by a week so that they can reset the operatic sets within the production house in order to have the opera work. So it's like 2 nights of opera followed by a week of rest, and then 2 more nights, and then So yes,
It's a big
So your
commitment.
dad kept taking you back?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay,
I found
so
this.
so is this where the whole idea? I mean, I've never seen the Ring Cycle. I've heard a little bit of Wagner's music, but is this where we get like this caricature of a lady in a Viking helmet with horns?
Yes, in the Ride of the Valkyrie. Yes,
Bum 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 bum. That
yes,
one. Okay.
yep.
Okay. Okay. So Brunhild, and so usually it's a woman who's kind of stout, who's got a really good operatic voice. Um, but that's
Flying through the air on a wooden horse. Yes.
right. Okay. Okay. So I was really fascinated by the differences and the similarities between the continental and the Scandinavian sources. Right. Um, did you guys have a look at that?
So he talks about, Christopher talks about that in the introduction some. And he says some of them are from 400 and Germanic, and some of them are from 700 more Norse. And then let me see, page 28. When the Elder Edda is mentioned, we practically mean a single. So at some point there was a compilation of some of these stories or poems into two books or two manuscripts. So when the Elder Edda is mentioned, we practically mean a single manuscript, number 2365-4, in the Royal Collection in Copenhagen, now known as the Codex Regius of the Elder Edda. It contains 29 poems. There are 45 leaves of it left. After leaf 32, a gathering, probably of 8 pages, has been lost. My father thought it probable that the loss was due to robbery of the long lay of Sigurd, supposed to have been the chief constituent of the poetry in the lost gathering. There appear to have been no losses at beginning and end, where losses frequently appear. So he goes on and kind of says, well, Tolkien kind of tried to piece together what the long lay of Sigurd would have been.
I found, just looking through the different versions, the continental Germanic traditions tended to be actually a little bit more it's like Nibelungenlied. It's a little bit more brutal. I feel like towards
Sure, yes.
towards Brunhild, I was like, wow, the one guy. So Siegfried or Sigurd, takes the the challenge, of course, is to appear as Gunther or Gundar, and to marry her, and then. But in his friend's form. In the German one, he actually overpowers her and sleeps with her. But in the Elder Edda, the Prose Edda, not the Elder, the younger Edda, the Prose Edda, he does not sleep with her, but places his sword between them in the marriage bed. And then Sigurd and Gunnar then return to their own shape. So that's very interesting, and I don't know if it's because in Iceland the pagan mythology had kind of been maybe reworked a little bit more to fit more Christian, morality, or if that in the Scandinavian tradition it would have been considered more a sign of his nobility. I'm not sure, but I kind of liked the poetic Edda more because it wasn't quite so brutal. I mean, although I have to say some of the different parts of the poetic, some of the parts of Poetic Edda, the older one, are also brutal. So the further back you go, I guess that's true, right? So you've got, for example, the blood eagle that Sigurd chooses to kill Lingvi and the other sons of Hunding before he kills the dragon Fafnir, and he kills the brothers in battle and carves a blood eagle on Lingvi. I mean, that's straight up Viking stuff there, and that's the Poetic Edda, but the Prose Edda is later on. So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
They were a very brutal people. I think both of them, both peoples, the Scandinavians and the Norse people and the Germans.
Yeah. I think the fight against the dragon in some ways also kind of represents the fight within a culture to you've got it's a harsh climate. You've got to protect your culture, your people, your clan, and yet how do you do that within like boundaries and social norms so that you don't just end up having chaos and anarchy? To me, the dragon kind of symbolizes that anarchy. He fights Fafnir. The blood of the dragon makes him invulnerable, except for one place, which is very interesting that you have on a very different side of Europe. You have, of course, the weak spot on the heel of what Greek hero? Or is it Trojan hero, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah. So Achilles has also one spot where he's not been touched by this magical ointment.
No, I thought he dipped it in a magical river.
Dipped in the water.
Yeah.
So shall we read some of this? It'd be nice maybe to get a little bit into it before we have to finish. We're almost done here. I feel it'd be nice to read a little bit of Tolkien because he's got his own spin on it, doesn't he? He's kind of made Sigurd into like the savior of the world, but in order to be the savior of the world and fulfill the prophecy, it's going to be really, really difficult, right? So maybe we can do this in kind of just a little taster, and then we can get into it next month. This is from the Lay of the Volsungs as written by j.r.r. Tolkien. Volsungakvida et nia, Upaf, the beginning. Of old was an age when was emptiness. There was sand nor sea nor surging waves. Unwrought was earth, unroofed was heaven, an abyss yawning and no blade of grass. The great gods then began their toil. The wondrous world they well builded. From the south the sun from seas rising gleamed down on grass green at morning. They hall and hallow high up hope towering, gleaming gabled, golden posted, rock-hewn ramparts reared in splendor, forge and fortress framed immortal. Unmarred their mirth in many a court, where men they made of their minds cunning. Under hills of heaven, on high builded, they lived in laughter long years ago. Dread shapes arose from the dim spaces over sheer mountains by the shoreless sea. Friends of darkness, foes immortal, old unbegotten, out of ancient void. To the world came war, the walls of gods, giants beleaguered. Joy was ended. The mountains were moved, mighty ocean surged and thundered. The sun trembled. The gods gathered on golden thrones of doom and death deeply pondered. How fate should be fended, their foes vanquished. Their labor healed, light rekindled. In forge's fire of flaming wrath was heaviest hammer hewn and wielded. Thunder and lightning Thor the mighty flung among them, felled and sundered. In fear they fled foes immortal, from the walls beaten watched unceasing, ringed earth around with roaring sea, and mountains of ice on the margin of the world. That's the first part.
Tolkien stuff sounds very similar
Yes,
to that style.
it does, doesn't it? So that's the first section of his reworking of the Volsunga saga. He's got to show things are bad. There's bad guys out there, the giants, the Jotuns, And then the next section, which we'll I think get to next time, is about, he mentions Surt, or Surtsey, the fire giant. He mentions the wolf Fenrir, the deep dragon, and then of course we'll see how Sigurd gets prepared for this.
Worlds of Beowulf.
Yes.
There's a whole part of the campaign
Oh.
where they go to Jotunheim
Oh boy.
and they go through each of the levels of the giants. There's
Yes.
a city is each level of giant lives above the other.
Yep.
Till you get near the top, you have to deal with the dragon.
Oh boy.
And you have to try to cross the Bifrost.
Oh yes.
The Rainbow Bridge.
Right, Rainbow Bridge.
Without falling through to Hades or
Oh boy.
getting incinerated instantly.
That must have been pretty intense.
And you end up in Valhalla and you get to meet Odin and the others there and have a feast with them and as they prepare you for the next stage of your journey as heroes.
And do the Valkyries come into the story?
Yes, actually, your reason why you're there is you have retrieved from a volcano the sleeping form of Brunhilde.
Oh my
Who
goodness.
was there because of Freya
Yes.
forcing him to put her there.
Right.
So you as heroes went and retrieved her. And
Okay.
now you're bringing her home.
Oh wow, nice weaving
That's
in
all
there.
part of
Yes,
the
well
Worlds of
done.
Beowulf, because Worlds of Beowulf, multiverse is falling apart, and the idea is to get allies from across the multiverse to fight against the enemies of the multiverse to stop the fracturing. So it lets me weave in all these stories, including Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, and
Oh, very good.
all of them are in this campaign.
Tolkien would say, "Oh, this was horrible," and C.S. Lewis would be like, "Yes, I love it."
So, yeah.
Well, we'll have to leave it there until next time and continue on. So that gives you a whole month to order your copy of The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun. Yours available at all good bookstores.
Okay. I gotta take off, guys.
And all evil bookstores too.
Namarian, eh?
Good to see you, Gary. Take care.
All right.
Namarie. Chris, how are you in the South Farthing there?
Doing well.
Good, good.
Preparing. It's May-cember.
Did you say May
It's,
summer?
and yes.
What is that?
So, school budget, birthday, my wife's birthday, our anniversary, end of school stuff.
Oh yes, it's like the end of the year.
Yeah, it's May-cember.
I see what you mean there. I see what you
Yes.
did there. It's like everything's happening super busy right before the end, just like in December.
Yep.
Well, we can probably end the live recording now if you haven't yet, Hawk.
All right. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back. We'll be
Thank
back
you.
on the second Saturday next month.
Yes.
So let people know that will be.
Yep, that'll be June, probably the 10th.
June 10th, 2023 at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We'll be back. Right here at youtube.com/Tolkien Society. No, Tolkien Scholars.
Yes, and also you.
TolkienScholars.org.
We'll try to get the notes up to tolkienscholars.org so you can always look there and confirm that before you get on next month, and we'll confirm when the date is.
And Rob, you now have it set up with the default multi-password for your webmail. All right.
All right.
Namarie.
Namarie. See you, Chris.